Taehyung confronted Jungkook about a message he was never supposed to see. A single text, glowing on a phone screen, mentioning a future bride. And in that moment, everything Taehyung believed about them began to collapse. "Is this supposed to be funny, Jungkook?" Taehyung's voice cut through the silence like broken glass. His hand trembled slightly as he held Jungkook's phone, the screen still unlocked, the message still there. He hadn't knocked when he entered Jungkook's studio apartment. He hadn't needed to. The door was unlocked just like the truth had been, exposed without permission. The overhead lights flickered faintly, but it was the tension between them that truly filled the room. Thick, electric, almost unbearable. Jungkook stood frozen near the window, his back half turned, as if the city lights outside could offer him an escape. His phone lay on the couch between them, abandoned like evidence at a crime scene. "I can't wait to see you in the dress, future Mrs. Kim." The words weren't just text, they were a wound. Taehyung felt his chest tighten, his breath uneven, something sharp twisting inside him that felt too deep to be just jealousy. It felt like betrayal, or worse, confirmation. Jungkook didn't speak. He didn't move. His eyes were wide, unreadable, locked on Taehyung, but empty of answers. Taehyung took a step closer. "Who is she?" His voice cracked, not because he was weak, but because he was trying not to be. "You told me there was no one. You looked me in the eyes and said nothing had changed." Jungkook's fingers slowly curled into a fist at his side, his knuckles whitening. Still, he said nothing. The silence was louder than any confession. 1,000 memories rushed through Taehyung's mind. Late-night calls that lasted until sunrise. The way Jungkook's replies had become slower over the past month. Rehearsals canceled at the last minute. Missed calls. Excuses about schedules, about pressure, about being tired. And then the way Jungkook had started talking about duty, about timing, about responsibility. As if those words were shields. "You owe me the truth," Taehyung said, stepping closer, closing the distance between them. "I deserve that much." The familiar scent of Jungkook's cologne hit him, warm and comforting, yet suddenly foreign, like a memory that no longer belonged to him. Jungkook finally turned his gaze away, staring down at the floor. "It's not what you think," he said quietly, barely above a whisper. "Then tell me what it is," Taehyung replied immediately. Jungkook exhaled slowly, his throat tightening visibly. "My family arranged something months ago. I didn't want it, I didn't agree, but they insisted." Taehyung felt his heart sink. "And you didn't think I deserved to know." His voice was softer now, but more dangerous. "You let me believe I was imagining things." "What would I have said?" Jungkook's voice rose slightly, not in anger but in exhaustion. "That I'm being pulled into something I can't control, that I'm expected to smile for cameras and pretend this is love." His voice broke on the last word. "I didn't want you to look at me like you're looking at me now." Taehyung stepped back, as if those words physically pushed him. "I thought we meant something," he said quietly. "I thought even if things got complicated, you'd still choose honesty." "I didn't lie," Jungkook said quickly, stepping forward. "I just didn't tell you because I didn't want it to be real, because I didn't know how to let go." Taehyung's expression hardened. "You let go the second you let her call herself your future bride." The words landed like a slap. Jungkook flinched. His mouth opened, searching for something. An apology, an explanation, anything, but nothing came out. The air between them felt heavy, like a storm about to break. Taehyung turned toward the door. "If you're not fighting this, then you've already made your choice." His voice no longer trembled, it was calm, cold, final. Jungkook reached out instinctively, but stopped himself before touching him. "I didn't choose her." Taehyung opened the door without turning back. "No," he said quietly, "you just didn't choose me." Then the door closed, and the silence returned. But this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they never said. The silence after Taehyung left felt heavier than the argument itself. Jungkook stood alone in the middle of his apartment, staring at the closed door as if it might open again if he waited long enough. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his mind replaying Taehyung's last words on a loop. "You just didn't choose me." He sank onto the edge of the couch, his phone still lying beside him, the same screen that had destroyed everything. Slowly, he picked it up, stared at the message again, then locked the screen as if that could erase it. It didn't. Across the city, Taehyung walked through the empty backstage corridor, still dressed in his rehearsal clothes, his mind numb, his body moving on autopilot. He barely remembered finishing practice, barely remembered the faces of the staff who greeted him. All he could hear was Jungkook's voice. "My family arranged something months ago." His phone vibrated in his pocket. "Jungkook." Taehyung didn't open it. He kept walking until he reached the old practice room, the one they used to sneak into late at night when schedules were lighter and the world felt smaller. The place where they laughed, where they talked about dreams that felt real back then. He sent a single text. "We need to talk, come here." Minutes passed. Then footsteps. Jungkook stood at the entrance, hesitant, as if crossing the doorway meant stepping into something irreversible. "What message?" Jungkook asked cautiously, though his eyes already betrayed him. Taehyung didn't move closer. He pulled out his phone, scrolled once, and turned the screen toward Jungkook. "Last week, midnight, you said, 'I miss talking to you like we used to.'" His eyes lifted slowly. "If you're preparing to marry someone else, why reach out to me at all?" Jungkook stared at the screen, then back at Taehyung. There was sadness in his eyes, the kind that didn't look like regret, but like longing. "Because I wasn't preparing to marry her. Not emotionally. Not really," he said quietly. "I sent that message after spending hours trying to convince myself to forget you, and failing." Taehyung felt something tighten in his chest. "So what am I to you?" he asked. "A backup plan, a guilty conscience before you disappear into a wedding and a perfect public image." "That's not fair," Jungkook said. "No," Taehyung stepped forward, voice rising slightly. "What's not fair is letting me believe I was the problem. You blamed schedules, fatigue, pressure. You let me blame myself while you knew the truth the whole time." Jungkook's voice cracked. "I was scared, T. Scared that if I said it out loud it would become real, and scared that once you knew, you'd walk away." "You should have respected me enough to give me that choice," Taehyung replied, softer now, but heavier. There was a long pause. Then Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, frustration spilling out. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I dreamed of a future where I don't even recognize the person standing next to me?" "Then why aren't you fighting it?" Taehyung asked. "You're not a child, you can say no." "I tried," Jungkook said. "They said it was temporary at first, a formality. Now it's photo shoots, interviews, brand deals. Suddenly it's real. And every time I protest, I'm told to grow up and stop chasing fantasies." Taehyung laughed bitterly. "So I'm a fantasy now?" "No," Jungkook stepped closer. "You're the only thing that ever felt real to me." Taehyung looked away, his eyes burning. "And yet you stayed silent. You let me wonder why your laugh felt distant, why your hand stopped reaching for mine first." Jungkook's voice dropped. "I didn't want to break you." "You didn't break me," Taehyung whispered. "You just made me question if I was ever part of your truth." Silence. Then Jungkook said something that froze Taehyung completely. "I tried to call it off yesterday." Taehyung turned slowly. "What?" "I told my parents I couldn't do it, that I was in love with someone else." Taehyung stared at him, stunned. "And they said I was selfish," Jungkook continued. "That this wasn't just about me anymore, that it was about reputation, alliances, legacy." Taehyung let out a hollow laugh. So love is a liability now. Apparently, Jungkook said quietly. Taehyung stepped closer, their faces only inches apart. Then what does love mean to you, Jungkook? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but fragile. It means being willing to burn down the life everyone else built for me, if it means I get to build one with you. The room felt like it stopped breathing. Then why are we still standing here pretending we're powerless? Taehyung asked. Jungkook's eyes dropped. Because I'm still trying to figure out if I have the courage to burn it all down, or if I'll wake up one day and realize I lost both you and everything else. Taehyung turned toward the door again, slower this time. You can't have both, not like this, not in the shadows. I know, Jungkook whispered. Then decide, Taehyung said, opening the door, because I won't stay in the gray area forever. The door clicked shut. But this time, Jungkook didn't stay frozen. He stood staring at the empty space, his chest heaving, his mind racing. Slowly, he reached for his phone. He typed one sentence. Let's meet tomorrow, no more silence. You're late. Taehyung said it the moment Jungkook stepped into the quiet rooftop lounge they used to escape to during tour rehearsals. The sky above them was painted in soft shades of gray and fading sunlight, the city stretching endlessly below. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. Jungkook closed the door behind him and walked toward Taehyung slowly, like someone approaching something fragile. I know, he said. I needed time to think. Taehyung let out a small, bitter laugh without looking at him. A moment you've had weeks, a whole engagement. Don't, Jungkook said quietly. Don't throw that word at me like I ever wanted this. Then what do you want? Taehyung finally turned, his eyes sharp. Because I'm done fighting for something you refuse to even define. Jungkook stopped a few steps away. I want you, he said. But wanting you and choosing you in front of the world are two different wars. Taehyung shook his head. Then maybe I'm tired of being the hidden truth. Maybe I deserve to be chosen without secrecy. You do, Jungkook said immediately. You deserve more than what I've given you. I was trying to protect you. Protect me, Taehyung's voice cracked. By shutting me out, by letting me find out about your fiancé through a message on your own phone. Jungkook didn't flinch. I didn't know how to tell you. I was ashamed. Of me, Taehyung whispered. No, Jungkook said instantly. Of myself, for not being strong enough to stop it before it got this far. Taehyung turned toward the city lights, his reflection faint in the glass. You said no more silence, he said. So stop speaking in circles, just tell me, do you plan on marrying her? The question hung between them like smoke. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Not if it means losing you. Taehyung closed his eyes. That should have been enough, but it's not now. Then tell them, Taehyung said. Call it off. Face the consequences. Don't keep me in a room while you're out there playing someone else's perfect groom. Jungkook stepped beside him, leaning against the railing. I did tell them, 2 nights ago. I told them I was stepping back, that I wouldn't go through with something that felt like a performance. Taehyung turned slowly. And they weren't happy, Jungkook admitted. They said I was throwing away years of planning, that I was embarrassing both families, that I was acting on emotion. Aren't we allowed to feel? Taehyung asked softly. Or are we just chess pieces now? They said the only way I could walk away cleanly was if it looked like my decision alone, not because of someone else. Taehyung gave a sad smile. So I have to stay invisible. No, Jungkook said, reaching for his hand. Not this time, I'm going public. Taehyung looked at him in disbelief. What do you mean? I booked a solo interview. Tomorrow, I'm going to speak honestly about stepping away from the arrangement, about choosing my own life. Taehyung swallowed. And me? Jungkook hesitated. I won't say your name, not unless you want me to, but I won't hide what you mean to me either. I'll let people read between the lines. Taehyung studied him carefully. You're really doing this? Yes, Jungkook said. And whatever comes next, I want to face it without letting fear decide for me. Taehyung's voice softened. Then why do I still feel like I'm bracing for heartbreak? Jungkook reached up, gently touching his face. Because we've been surviving instead of living for so long, we forgot what peace feels like. Taehyung felt his throat tighten. Promise me this isn't just another beautiful idea that disappears tomorrow. Jungkook rested his forehead against his. I promise you my truth. I promise you my fight. They stood there in silence, the city humming beneath them. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The next night, Taehyung sat alone in a dim private cafe, the rain outside blurring the lights of passing cars. His phone lay face down beside a barely touched cup of tea. He was already there when Jungkook arrived, hood pulled over his head, water dripping from his jacket. I saw the article, Taehyung said immediately. They twisted it, Jungkook replied, sitting across from him. I gave them honesty. They printed what they wanted. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. You said you needed time to focus on yourself. That's not honesty. That's avoidance. If I said more, they would have dragged you into it, Jungkook said. They were already fishing for names. You were protecting your image, Taehyung said quietly, not me. Jungkook looked away. I sat there for an hour telling them the truth. They cut it into 2 lines that made me look confused. Then why didn't you release your own statement? Taehyung asked. You have a platform, you could have said something real. Because the moment I say the word love, they connect it to you, Jungkook said. They'll follow you, harass you, question everything. So I stay a secret, Taehyung replied bitterly. You're not a secret to me. But to the world I am. The silence between them thickened. Then Jungkook spoke again, unexpectedly. I told her. Taehyung looked up. The girl they wanted me to marry, I called her this morning. And she wasn't surprised. She said she always knew. She told me to stop being afraid of loving out loud. Taehyung looked down at his hands. And what are you going to do now? Jungkook pulled out his phone and opened a draft. I wrote an open letter to my fans. I didn't post it because I wanted to talk to you first. Taehyung read the words silently. They weren't dramatic. They were honest. You're really going to post this? Taehyung asked. If you're okay with it. Taehyung hesitated, then nodded. Then I'll be beside you when it goes live. Jungkook smiled, relief flooding his face. He reached across the table and took Taehyung's hand openly, without hiding. The rain outside kept falling. But for the first time, neither of them felt like they were running. The sun had barely risen when Jungkook's phone began vibrating nonstop. Notifications stacked across the screen like falling dominoes. Comments, reposts, headlines, news articles, messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years. His open letter had gone live less than 6 hours ago, and the world was already reacting. He sat at the kitchen counter, still wearing yesterday's clothes, eyes tired but focused. Across from him, Taehyung scrolled silently through social media, his expression unreadable. They're calling you brave, Taehyung said finally, and reckless and romantic and irresponsible all at once. Jungkook let out a quiet breath. That's how I know I said something real. It made people uncomfortable. Taehyung looked up from his phone. Do you regret it? Not for a second, Jungkook replied. Do you? Taehyung set the phone down slowly. No, but it's overwhelming. We used to talk about being honest someday, about not hiding. Now that it's happening, I feel like I'm standing in front of a storm. You don't have to say anything, Jungkook said gently. I'm not asking you to step into the spotlight with me. That's not what scares me, Taehyung said quietly. I'm scared of losing you again, not to her, to the version of you the world wants to reshape. Jungkook moved closer, sitting beside him. They'll praise me today, tomorrow they'll question everything, they always do. Jungkook reached for Taehyung's hand, intertwining their fingers. Then let them. I'll answer with how I live, not with explanations. Before Taehyung could respond, Jungkook's phone rang. His manager's name flashed on the screen. Jungkook hesitated, then answered. There was a pause, his expression tightened. Taehyung leaned forward. What is it? Jungkook ended the call slowly. They want an emergency meeting at the agency. Some sponsors are reconsidering. Taehyung stood up immediately. I'll come with you. No, Jungkook said softly but firmly. Not yet. This is something I need to face first. But wait for me. Taehyung searched his face, then nodded. Just don't let them twist your words again. I won't. The agency building felt colder than usual. Executives sat around a long glass table, their expressions carefully neutral. Jungkook entered calmly, his posture steady despite the tension in the room. You've created a media storm, one director said. Our phones haven't stopped ringing, another added. Some investors are pulling out. They say the uncertainty reflects poorly on the brand. Jungkook didn't raise his voice. Then maybe the brand should reflect something more human. Silence fell over the room. You could have consulted us, a senior manager said. You made a personal decision with public consequences. Because it was personal, Jungkook replied. And I'm not a puppet, I'm a person. I refuse to live a story that doesn't belong to me. The head executive tapped his pen slowly. No one is punishing you for honesty, but you forced us into damage control. We need a follow-up narrative, something softer. I've already told the truth, Jungkook said. I'm not offering a diluted version to make people comfortable. Then at least do a moderated interview, another director suggested. Address the rumors, reframe the situation. Jungkook paused. I'll consider it on one condition. They looked up. From now on, I approve every statement tied to my name, every caption, every release, every image. If I'm the face of this, I shape it. The room hesitated. Then the head executive nodded. Agreed, but understand this level of transparency makes you vulnerable. Jungkook offered a faint smile. Then I'll speak with clarity. When he returned home hours later, Taehyung was asleep on the couch, still wearing his hoodie, earphones tangled around his neck. Jungkook sat beside him and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Taehyung stirred. How'd it go? Intense, Jungkook said, but they know I'm not backing down. Taehyung sat up. You still want to do the interview? Yes, Jungkook nodded, but I'm not going to defend myself, I'm going to define myself. Taehyung smiled faintly. Then let's make this story ours for real this time. They sat in silence, hands intertwined, the noise of the outside world temporarily distant. The studio lights were brighter than usual. Everything looked polished, calm, professional, but behind the scenes tension pulsed through the air. Taehyung stood just beyond the curtain, hidden from the cameras. Jungkook sat in the interview chair, dressed simply in black, hands resting on his knees. The producer approached him again. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Once it airs, there's no taking it back. Jungkook nodded. I've never been more sure. The host entered, the cameras rolled. 3, 2, 1. The red light turned on. Today we're joined by Jungkook, who recently made headlines for stepping away from a highly publicized engagement, the host said. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, Jungkook replied calmly. Many assumed your decision was sudden, Was it? Jungkook looked directly into the camera. No, it was months of quiet conflict. I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of admitting that the version of me everyone loved wasn't the one I could live as anymore. Behind the curtain, Taehyung felt his heart tighten. You mentioned authenticity in your letter, the host continued. Some interpreted that as choosing someone specific. Jungkook paused. There is someone, he said. Someone who's been part of my journey longer than most people realize. But this decision wasn't only about love. It was about truth. And is this person someone the public knows? Jungkook smiled softly. Maybe, maybe not, but who they are isn't the point. It's how they make me feel, seen, brave, grounded. Taehyung leaned against the wall, his eyes burning. What do you want people to take from this? The host asked. Jungkook sat straighter. That it's okay to rewrite your story. It's okay to walk away from something that doesn't feel like yours. And it's okay to fight for someone, even if the world doesn't understand yet. The cameras stopped rolling. Applause filled the studio. As Jungkook stepped away from the lights, Taehyung appeared from behind the curtain. You didn't have to go that far, Taehyung whispered. I needed to, Jungkook replied, for us. They walked into the elevator together, the doors closing behind them. Outside, reporters waited. But neither of them felt like running anymore. For the first time, they felt like they were finally arriving. The elevator doors opened into a corridor flooded with camera flashes. Reporters called Jungkook's name from every direction, voices overlapping, questions colliding into noise. Security tried to form a path, but the crowd pressed in, hungry for reactions, for confessions, for anything that could become tomorrow's headline. Jungkook instinctively reached for Taehyung's hand. Not tightly, not dramatically, just enough to remind himself he wasn't alone. Taehyung looked at him, eyes steady. Ready. Jungkook nodded. They walked forward together. Microphones were thrust toward them. Jungkook, are you confirming a relationship? Is this about Taehyung? Are you coming out? The questions hit harder than expected. Jungkook stopped. The room fell quiet, surprised by his sudden stillness. I'm not here to label my life for anyone, he said calmly. I'm here to live it honestly. A reporter raised her voice. So is Taehyung the person you mentioned in the interview? Jungkook glanced sideways. Taehyung didn't look away. He didn't flinch. Jungkook took a breath. He's someone I love, he said simply. The words echoed. No metaphors. No avoidance. No escape. Just truth. The corridor exploded. Shouts, gasps, cameras clicking faster, security tightening their circle. Taehyung felt his heart pound, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped closer. I'm not a secret, Taehyung said quietly but clearly enough for the nearest microphones. And neither is he. Silence followed for half a second. Then chaos. Their names trended within minutes. The drive home was quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said. Jungkook stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. I just changed everything, he said softly. Taehyung leaned his head against the glass. You didn't change everything. You finally stopped pretending. Jungkook smiled faintly. I'm terrified. Me too, Taehyung admitted, but at least we're terrified together. The next morning, headlines covered every screen. Some were supportive. Some were cruel. Some tried to romanticize it. Others tried to destroy it. Fans were divided. Brands were silent. The industry buzzed with speculation. Taehyung woke up to thousands of messages. Some from friends. Some from strangers. some from people he had once trusted. Jungkook watched him scroll. "Do you want me to make a statement for you?" he asked. Taehyung shook his head. "No, I think I want to speak for myself." He opened his social media app and typed slowly. Not a press release. Not an explanation. Just one sentence. "I didn't choose a headline, I chose a person." He posted it. The reaction was immediate. Jungkook stared at the screen. "That's more powerful than anything I said." Taehyung shrugged. "It's the only truth I care about." They spent the day together indoors, ignoring the outside world as much as possible, cooking badly, watching old variety shows, laughing at inside jokes that only they understood. For a few hours, fame didn't exist. But reality waited. That evening, Jungkook's manager called again. "They want a joint appearance," she said. "A controlled setting, a serious talk show. They think it will stabilize public opinion." Taehyung looked at Jungkook. "What do you think?" Jungkook hesitated. "I don't want to turn us into a spectacle." "But hiding again isn't an option either," Taehyung said gently. Jungkook nodded. "Then we do it our way, no scripted answers, no forced narrative." The studio was different this time. No flashy lights. No live audience. Just two chairs facing each other and a calm host. The cameras started rolling. "People around the world are watching this," the host said. "What would you like them to understand?" Jungkook looked at Taehyung before answering. "That love isn't a scandal, it's not a strategy, it's not a marketing move. It's a human experience." Taehyung continued. "And fear doesn't disappear when you're famous. It just gets louder. We didn't come here to prove anything. We came here because we were tired of hiding." The host nodded. "Do you think the industry will change because of this?" Jungkook smiled slightly. "Maybe not today, but maybe someone watching feels less alone." Taehyung reached for Jungkook's hand on camera. "And maybe that's enough for now." The broadcast ended quietly. No dramatic music. No viral moment. Just two people telling their story. That night as they lay in bed, the world finally felt distant again. Taehyung whispered, "Do you ever miss the version of us before all this?" Jungkook thought for a moment. "I miss the simplicity, but I don't miss the fear." Taehyung smiled. "Then maybe this is our real beginning." Jungkook turned toward him. "Not maybe, it is." Outside, the city kept moving. But for once, they weren't chasing it. They were finally standing still together, in the truth they had been too afraid to say out loud for so long. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because, for the first time, Jungkook and Taehyung stopped shaping themselves to survive it. They were no longer hiding in corners of backstage halls or speaking in coded messages. They walked into schedules together, sat side by side in meetings, shared cars without excuses, laughed in public without checking who was watching. And somehow the world didn't end. There were still critics. There were still anonymous accounts throwing words like betrayal, scandal, disappointment. Some fans unfollowed. Some sponsors quietly stepped back. But something else happened too. Letters arrived. Messages from people who had grown up watching them, thanking them for choosing honesty. Fans who said they finally felt brave enough to be themselves. Artists who admitted they had been living double lives for years. Taehyung read one message out loud one night. "You made me feel like my heart isn't something I have to apologize for." He looked up at Jungkook, eyes glassy. "Do you realize what we started?" Jungkook shook his head. "I didn't start anything, I just stopped running." Their first public event together was not glamorous. No red carpet. No fashion show. Just a small charity concert supporting mental health awareness. They arrived holding hands, not posing, not performing, just existing. Cameras captured the moment anyway. But this time, the narrative felt different. Not scandal, not shock, just two people walking forward. Backstage, Taehyung sat on a folding chair, nerves quietly buzzing. "I used to think I needed permission to be myself," he said. Jungkook smiled. "You just needed courage." Taehyung laughed softly. "No, I needed someone who made fear feel smaller." When Jungkook went on stage to perform, he didn't sing the song he was known for. He chose a slower track, one he had written but never released. The lyrics weren't perfect, but they were honest. About loving someone quietly. About almost losing them to silence. About choosing truth even when it costs you comfort. In the audience, Taehyung closed his eyes. Not because he was overwhelmed, but because for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the sound of his own heart. Later that night, they walked home through empty streets, hoodies pulled low, city lights reflecting on wet pavement. "Do you think we'll still be together when this isn't news anymore?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook thought for a moment. "I hope so, but I don't want forever because of headlines. I want forever because we still choose each other when nobody's watching." Taehyung stopped walking. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." Jungkook laughed. "I didn't plan it." They stood there under a broken street lamp, the world quiet around them. No cameras, no fans, no expectations. Just two people breathing in the same moment. Months passed. The noise softened. Not gone, but manageable. They learned new routines, boundaries, how to protect their private life without erasing it. They fought sometimes. About schedules, about distance, about the fear of losing what they had finally gained. But they also learned how to argue without running, how to apologize without pride, how to listen without preparing an escape. One night, lying on the couch watching nothing in particular, Taehyung asked quietly, "Do you ever wish we had done this earlier?" Jungkook smiled sadly. "No, because we wouldn't have been ready. We needed to become people who could survive the truth." Taehyung nodded. "Then maybe timing isn't about when. It's about who you are when it happens." Jungkook turned toward him. "And who are you now?" Taehyung smiled. "Someone who doesn't feel invisible anymore." Jungkook reached for his hand. "And I'm someone who finally feels real." The world outside kept moving. Trends changed. New scandals replaced old ones. New idols rose. New stories took over timelines. But theirs stopped being a headline. It became a life. Not perfect, not dramatic, just honest. And in the end, that was the only kind of story worth telling. This story exists only as a work of imagination. Everything you have read before this point, and everything that will follow after, is entirely fictional, created for narrative exploration and entertainment rather than as a reflection of real events, real relationships, or real lives. It is not a report, not a biography, not a piece of journalism, and not a claim about anything that has ever actually happened. It does not present facts, evidence, or information about the real world, and it should never be interpreted as such. The characters, their emotions, their conflicts, their conversations, their choices, and the situations they move through are all invented elements within a fictional universe designed to explore themes of identity, fear, honesty, love, and consequence in a symbolic and dramatic way. Although some names or surface traits may feel familiar, they are used only as narrative devices, loosely inspired by public imagery, and not as representations of real individuals. The personalities, inner thoughts, private lives, motivations, and relationships depicted here do not belong to any real person, and are not meant to describe, imply, or suggest anything about the true character, behavior, or experiences of anyone who exists outside this story. Any similarity to real people, real events, or real situations is purely coincidental and unintentional, arising only from the way fiction often borrows recognizable forms to create emotional resonance. This narrative should be approached in the same way one approaches a novel, a film, or a stage play, as a constructed story that invites feeling, reflection, and imagination, but not belief in its literal truth. It is meant to evoke empathy and thought, not to be treated as information, rumor, proof, or insider knowledge. It should not be shared as if it were news, it should not be cited as fact, and it should not be used to support speculation, gossip, or assumptions about real people. The emotional intensity of the story is part of its design, but intensity does not equal reality, and narrative realism does not mean factual accuracy. Reading responsibly also means understanding the ethical boundary between fiction and real life. This story is not an invitation to analyze, judge, or project its content onto actual individuals. It is not a tool for harassment, defamation, or viral rumor-making, and it should never be framed or presented as something that reveals hidden truths about anyone. Fiction can feel powerful precisely because it feels close to life, but that closeness is an illusion created by language, structure, and emotional framing, not by real evidence or lived experience. The purpose of this disclaimer is not to distance the reader from the story, but to gently realign the way it is held in the mind. The characters are symbolic, the conflicts are narrative constructions, and the emotions are written expressions, not private realities. The story does not seek to replace reality, only to explore certain human themes through a fictional lens. It is safe to feel moved by it, to resonate with it, and to find meaning in it, as long as that meaning remains within the space of imagination and reflection. From this point forward, the narrative continues within the same fictional framework. Nothing that follows should be interpreted as truth, testimony, or representation of real life. It remains a story, and only a story, inviting the reader to stay engaged not as a believer, but as a thoughtful observer within a world that exists solely in words.